This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is brought to you by the Winter Carnival coming up on March the 9th through the 11th in Pigeon Forge in Tennessee. I just returned from the Magi Fest, and hopefully you enjoyed the 3 daily reports that I gave from there. And my next convention will be there in March at the Winter Carnival, and I hope to see you there. But if you can't make it, I will be reporting from those few days as well while I'm at the convention. And then I'm off to the Magic Castle, actually, to perform in the parlor. So if you're out in that area, be sure to catch me while I'm out there then as well. But I will be coming up at the Winter Carnival in Pigeon Forge, and I encourage all of you to go and sign up. If you go over to the magicwordpodcast.com's convention page, we got a place there where you can actually hear a little bit longer chat with Tom Vorjahan, who tells us some information that we all need to know about what's going to be happening at the convention. But you'll hear from Tom a little bit later in this podcast. Speaking of this podcast, this was recorded this past year when we were at the TRICS convention, the TRICS, that's the Tri-Seas convention, the Carolina Close-Up convention that Scott Robinson puts on out in Charlotte, North Carolina, each November. And it is a great convention, and one of the people who was performing there and I had a chance to sit down with is my friend Terry Ward. This was a conversation that has been, again, long overdue. I have so many friends in magic that I want to get to, and I hope to live a very long life so I can get to all of you guys and gals out there. You've probably heard of the 10,000-hour rule, which was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. As Gladwell tells it, the rule goes like this. It takes 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery of complex skills and materials, like playing the violin or the piano, or perhaps even, as I would like to put it, being an expert magician, much like our guest here today. Terry Ward has spent well over 10,000 hours performing magic over the years in various theme parks, including Disney World. He has just a great repertoire and a wonderful personality, and he's got a lot to share with us here this week. And one of the things he's sharing with us also is a prize package in which he's going to be offering not one but two different things. So rather than telling you what those are right now, I'm going to introduce Terry, so this way we'll talk about that after the podcast. So be sure and stay tuned for that, and be sure and go to the website at themagicwordpodcast.com where you can sign up for the contest. Anyhow, more on that later, and also more about the Winter Carnival later as well. But for right now, let's hear from our guest this week, Mr. Terry Ward, here on The Magic Word. We're going a little bit different direction this week than we have gone in the past because we have had some people we've talked to about working theme parks and people who certainly many of the magicians who have been on the episodes of Magic Word Podcast have been longtime professional workers who have had thousands of shows, but there is nobody I think that can compete necessarily with my guest here today. And we're going to be talking about a variety of things. I know that you guys are going to get a lot out of it. You will learn a lot about it because we're going to be talking about not only his background, but also about character development and how that you can perhaps employ some of these tips and tricks into your own performance by creating a character, as well as some marketing ideas and business sense and having goals. Oh my gosh, we're going to cover it all. And this is someone who had worked with on several theme parks, and he'd worked with Disney for about 30 years, and he has, listen to this, over 40,000 shows that he's performed over there. So this is amazing, guy. Please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Terry Ward. Hey, Terry.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. The last guy that I spoke with about theme parks was Doug Anderson, and that has been many years ago, and I'm sure you know Doug.
Yes, I do.
Did you ever work with him by chance? Because he had worked, I want to say, up in Oklahoma or someplace. I'm not sure which theme park. How'd you get to know him, or do you read his books?
He used to live in Orlando.
That's right, because he was a cruise ship guy. So
yes,
he kind of worked out of Orlando, didn't he?
Yeah, so I used to see him at local meetings or magic gatherings. Yeah, great guy.
And so, again, I know he literally wrote the book on working theme parks. And was that anything that had influenced you at all? Did you read the book? Are you familiar with that? And
I hadn't read the book until after I'd already been involved.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard about it, and I was like, well, yeah, check that out.
I know he was friends also with Paul Osborne, and Paul Osborne had booked a lot of acts also on theme parks and things like that. But when you had worked at your first theme park, and you were in King's Landing, which
King's Dominion.
King's Dominion in
Yes.
Virginia, or
in
where
Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia.
So tell me something about that and how you actually got that, or did you have an agent?
Well, I had auditioned at Carowinds in North Carolina.
Okay.
And they sent me a letter and said that they didn't have any room for a magician. So I thought, oh, darn, because I thought the audition went really well.
Yeah.
But they contacted me a few weeks later and said, hey, we've got a sister park up in Richmond, Virginia, and we need a magician there because our magician backed out. I was like, great. That'll be super. Because I lived up in Springfield, Virginia, which was about an hour and 15 minutes away. And
that was where you from? You went to school here in North Carolina, though, right?
Yeah, I went to college here in North Carolina at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina.
And majored in theater.
Yes, I did. I majored in theater and got a minor in communications. And graduated in 86.
Okay. You're a young man.
Yeah.
Very young man.
Yes. Graduated high school in 81 and then did the 5-year college program.
Yeah. So going to Carowinds, when you had first auditioned, because it was kind of like in the neighborhood, basically, I guess. When we talk about theme parks, I mean, that's like with Ferris wheels and everything? Because I think of, obviously, Disneyland and Disney World today as being, and Knott's Berry Farm being those kind of things. But so they had roller coasters and all those kinds of rides?
Roller coasters. They have one roller coaster at Carowinds that went from North Carolina into South Carolina and back in again.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was really kind of cool. They had some great roller coasters, great rides. They had, at the time, they had the Hanna-Barbera characters.
Oh, sure. Okay.
At Carowinds and King's Dominion and King's Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also, at one point, acquired a park out in California somewhere. I don't recall the name of that.
Now, Carowinds is no longer...
Carowinds is still
here. Oh,
still
today.
here.
Okay.
Yep, Carowinds is still here, and King's Dominion is still open. It's owned by a different company now.
Okay.
I think it might be opened by Paramount, if I'm correct, but I'm not completely sure. And I haven't been up to Kings Island in a long time.
Now, were you in college at the time also when you had auditioned for
I was in
Carowinds?
college. That's what I had a buddy, David Beach, who was a juggler at Carowinds, and he said, you need to go to the audition. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of reluctant, but I thought, okay.
What do I got to lose?
Well, yeah. So I went to the audition. I'd worked up a routine that I could do for them. And
a magic, like stand-up or close-up kind of a show?
it was kind of like a parlor routine.
Okay.
Because David said he worked on a small stage with a small audience. So I thought, okay, I'll do a parlor kind of a thing. And the audition went well, but I didn't get in, but I was lucky enough to be contacted and went to King's Dominion, and that was a really nice park because it was a small park, so you knew everybody you were working with. Mm-hmm. And there were jugglers there. One of the guys I still know, his name is Max Winfrey. He still lives in Orlando. We've known each other for many years. Mm-hmm. There was a mime. There were incredible mime. We had balloon artists come through that did some nice work. So we had a variety performers that did stuff around the park, and we all broke in this pretty much the same area. So we'd all sit in kibitz and work on routines, and and I did. Let's see, how many years did I do? I did 5 years there.
And what was interesting is they asked you to move up here because you thought it was like an hour and a half drive or something from the house, and you could do that.
Yeah, it was about an hour, 15 hour and a half from Springfield to Richmond, and I just, after doing it a few times, the drive was it was a long drive. And there were some times if you ran into traffic that you really had to leave almost an hour early.
Oh, my.
So,
Were you living at home with Mom and Dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's when I went to Mom and Dad, and I said, I need to find a place.
My own place up there.
In Richmond, because that's a long drive.
Yeah.
So I ended up finding a place. There was an elderly woman who rented rooms out of her house, and I rented a room right on the railroad tracks. So every night at about 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
But after you'd been there for a month and a half, you just slept right through it. But she rented out a room. Her name was Mrs. Gray. She, from what I understand, I think she was a librarian for the Library of Congress.
Wow.
And retired in Ashland, Virginia, right outside of Richmond. It was a great place. I roomed there several summers.
It was just a summer job, though, only? I mean, it was
a
seasonal?
summer job, but you could, if you could get out of college early enough, you could do a few weekends prior to the
Before
summer hitting.
June?
June, July, and August.
Okay.
And then you could do a little bit into September.
Well, you really can't make a living, I wouldn't think, then doing.
No, you couldn't. And that was just
park.
a job, between college. So
Sure.
every summer I worked there. But I saw improvements in both my magic and my acting. And actually, my senior year, I did my junior year into my senior year, I did a work program for college where whatever routine I was working on at King's Dominion, I would write about the routine and the audience reaction and how they felt about the effect and whether I thought it was working, whether the lines I used. So I got some college credit out of that one summer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I actually, after my senior year in college, I went back there again. And then I went back to my folks. Now, by that time, my dad had been moved to New Jersey.
Okay.
So I went up into New Jersey and tried to do that New York actor thing. But I very quickly
New York actor thing.
learned that I did not like big cities.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
very quickly.
So it wasn't so much Broadway as it was just the city vibe didn't set with you.
No, it was that.
Interesting.
And probably because I had to take the bus all the time to go into the city.
You didn't live downtown?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I never lived in the city. I just had to take the bus in, and I'd go to a few auditions, but I'd go to every one of these auditions, and everybody in the room looked like me, and I was just like, how do they pick?
Yeah.
How
How did that go? Did you ever get selected for anything or do central casting or something?
I didn't, and but a buddy of mine called me and said, "Hey, come down to Florida. We got a few people. We're going to open up a theater group." And so we went down to Fort Myers area, and we opened a theater company. But at that time, when you lived in the Fort Myers area, when the summer came around, it died.
Oh.
Because it was all snowbirds.
Yeah, I was going to say too hot. Everybody went north.
Yeah. So we just couldn't make a living. So then I was headed back up to New Jersey, but I stopped at a buddy of mine's place, and he got me an audition with this gentleman who cast people for Walt Disney World.
Was that difficult? And I mean, if you hadn't known somebody, would that be hard for somebody to walk in off the street and just knock on the door and say, "Hey, I want an audition," without an agent or anybody, a representation?
Would have been really hard.
Okay.
I mean,
probably
now
more
they
so
have
now.
open auditions,
Now they do?
Yeah, they have open auditions you can go to. You go on the internet and you find Disney auditions, and it tells you everything that's available.
So you can do open auditions online now. You don't have to physically. I mean, you can
don't
be
have
in
to physically
Timbuktu.
show up.
Okay.
And at the time when I was there, you physically went to
Of course,
auditions.
sure.
And I imagine they'll start that up again, once things kind of calm down a little bit.
I was wondering about that, about how difficult that would have been. But, yeah, you were kind of in a lucky position. Kind of the stars
really lucky
aligned there.
that I met my friend was, felt comfortable enough to ask this guy if I could come into his office and audition.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And he's, and he sat me down and asked me, where do you see yourself going?
So he took an interest, not just in, here's somebody, we can put him, slot him over here.
Right.
But it's like he was
Interested
thinking
in me as a person.
He was thinking of you as a person and for a long time employee.
Right.
And not just a summer help kind of guy.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, I think a lot of the people that I know that still work at Walt Disney World that came in when I came in were hired by that man.
Huh.
So they've made quite a nice career out of working at Walt Disney World.
Right.
And it's a choice you make, obviously. You want to have a family and you want to, have friends that you can hang out with and
But
not
how
have
did
to
that differ?
continually travel.
How did that differ from, let's say, King's Landing? As far as you said, that was a very familial kind of a thing.
Yeah, Kings Island was nice because when I went to Kings Island, I did a Winterfest program.
Okay.
And they asked me if I want to go, and I was like, well, I'm out of college now, so I might as well go up to Kings Island and do this Winterfest program. But Kings Dominion and Kings Island they were much closer, more family.
More so than Disney?
Yeah, because Disney's like
big.
Big. There's
It's hard to be a family.
It's like 68,000 employees.
Wow.
And it's one of the largest on-site employers on the East Coast, from what I understand. And it's you're.
It's not a Mickey Mouse operation.
No, not at all. No, it isn't. It's a big operation.
Yeah.
But the acting community is still pretty small. I mean, you pretty much have heard about everybody working on property. But it's grown a lot. Like when I started at what at the time was called Disney's MGM Studios.
And what year was that?
This was in 1989.
Okay.
We had the Fab Five at the studios. Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, and Pluto.
Okay.
And within 2 years, that number had quadrupled.
Wow.
Is
that because of the Disney movies and the franchise just got bigger?
Disney movies, franchise got bigger. We had more parade. We started to do parades because MGM Studios was only supposed to be like a half-day park. And then they just started to add and make it larger. And
that was before Epcot, I guess, or was it?
After Epcot.
Okay, yeah.
Epcot. It was like Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's MGM Studios, and then the Animal Kingdom.
Now, what was it? And you worked for the MGM Studios.
I started at MGM Studios in a program called Streetmosphere, and I worked with 30 other improv actors.
Okay, on the streets.
On the streets,
physically.
Yeah,
okay.
And we did. I did improv. Sometimes I would do an improv set, and sometimes I would do a magic set.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I would do the magic thing because it was a little bit more variety.
Because I was thinking about Steve Martin. He worked, from what I remember, there in Orlando, I think. Oh, no, he's Disneyland.
He worked at
LA,
Disneyland, yes.
Or Anaheim. And he worked in a shop, I think probably selling magic at a magic shop there.
Right.
And they had a magic shop in Orlando, didn't they? Or
they used to have a magic shop at the Magic Kingdom on Main Street.
On Main Street.
Matter of fact, it was the first place I bought one of my Fantasio canes back in the day. When I was a kid.
Boy, that's a whole other story about Fantasio and those canes, the rise and fall, and how they had ripped it off of him. But the millions he'd made, first of all, he got in at the right time. And
yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyhow, not to digress, I think it's phenomenal. My first question I always was curious about is, obviously working for a company like that, you are working for a company, so you get a 401k, you get health insurance, I'm assuming, and vacations and all that.
We got health insurance, we got paid vacations, and we also had benefits through the Walt Disney Company, but then when Actors Equity came in and started representing the actors, our pension went to Actors Equity.
So your pension comes from Actors Equity now. So you got like a...
When I retire, yes.
Oh, right. But I mean, you got a card now. And does that mean that you can... That's different from SAG.
Yeah, it's different from SAG.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to act in a Disney film or something, you would have to get a SAG card. That's different than Actors Equity.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. Because that's Screen Actors Guild.
Yes.
And so Actors Equity is just those who might be acting in Broadway, for
Broadway
example.
And
live action.
Theaters around your town that may have an equity contract also. Not like community theaters, but more like like in Richmond there was a Richmond theater that hired equity actors.
What about those who are working summer jobs that might expect saying, hey, I'd like to work at Six Flags that's near me or something, if I go and audition? Should they expect today, and could they possibly qualify or get Social Security? Could they get medical benefits and all that, or is that just an hourly wage? And
I'm not sure about Six Flags, but if you're working at Disney, you're hired under an equity contract.
Okay.
So then you also.
Well, I'm thinking about like Kings Island, for an example.
Kings Island, we didn't have benefits.
Didn't have the benefits.
We didn't have health insurance.
Health insurance and all. Okay.
No, it was just a summer gig, and most of the people that worked there were, people who were in college.
Okay.
And singers.
That's why I was wondering about the expectations for those who might be thinking, we'd like to work for a theme park. Well, the reason you would want to do that, I guess, is for experience.
For me at the time, it was experience in a summer job because I used to lifeguard.
It's a lot better than well, of course, lifeguard just sit around, but
I got to do what I wanted. I wanted to perform as a magician, so it was a great job, and it gave you the chance to do. I was doing 5, sometimes 6 shows a day, and so the repetition was really good for honing your skills
and you had time in the evenings to do other side jobs.
Yeah, so like for example, one year this Italian family contacted me, and they had an Italian restaurant, and they said, "Would you like to work here a couple nights a week?" I'm like, "Yeah, great." Another summer, King's Dominion had a guess your age and weight. They said, "Would you like to make some extra money by being a pitch guy for guess your age and weight?" I was like, "Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?" That was kind of fun, It was kind of fun to be a pitch guy. And
did you learn how to physically, really do that? Can you guess somebody's age and weight still?
I was good at age, stunk at weight. So what I would do is I would draw a circle on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I would show them the circle, and I say, "That's where I'm going to write your age or your weight."
Okay.
And then I would turn it, and I would write my number, and then I would ask him, "How old are you?" And if I nailed it, I think you had to be within 2 years.
Let's say he's 37, and
yeah, so I had to be within 2 years.
Yeah.
So if I wrote 35, I was good, but if I wrote 34, I missed it.
Right.
And for weight, it was 3
pounds?
3 pounds above and
that's
below.
pretty tight.
Yeah, it was. So if I was within the thing, I just showed him. If I was way wrong, you win. Grab your prize. So I would never show it to him, especially if it was age and I was like way off. I'd be like, "Oh, that's embarrassing," And then one year, I worked in their cash control department.
Wow, completely different.
I needed some extra cash because I knew I had some things. I was going to need new tires for my van. So I worked in their cash control department a couple nights a week, just helping count the evening cash. And
in addition to
doing shows during the day.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'd go out in a van and we'd collect all the money from all the games area, and then we'd bring it in and we'd put it in machines and count. So here we were taking a brick of $20 bills, which I think is like $10,000, and putting it in a vault. You're just thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's like it's my college tuition, or something like that."
Yeah, every day. Were they paying you overtime for that kind of a thing?
They paid you a rate, but they didn't have any like overtime.
Okay, interesting. So when you were then with Disney, I assume that you knew Bev Bergeron.
I did.
You probably knew him from way back when.
I met Bev when I first came into town.
And let me mention to the listeners wondering, why am I bringing Bev Bergeron out of the blue? Because he worked the Golden Horseshoe there at Disneyland.
He was there at the Diamond Horseshoe for like 13 or 15 years, something like that.
Back in the 80s.
And I worked there in a different show than he was in. And I was there for about 6 years before they closed the show.
So I kind of got on track. I just want people to understand why I'm mentioning him who may not have known that. But you said that you had worked, or you first met Bev Bergeron where?
I'd gone to one of the local club meetings there, and met Bev there and found out about his history. And I started chatting with him to see, and then heard about him doing Rebo the Clown. So that was kind of neat to find out about that type of history. And so he was a nice guy. He helped me out a few times when I was having difficulty with either a routine or something. And his wife was just so pleasant. It was sad to lose them recently.
Yeah, so. Almost back to back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sad. She was like within a few months of Bev.
Yep.
So as you mentioned, he worked at the Diamond Horseshoe then as well. And so did you follow him, or was there somebody else that worked
No,
there?
after Bev's show closed, they opened another show that was pretty much 3 guys, 3 girls, and what you would consider to be like a red hot mama.
It was not magic at all.
No magic at all in that show.
Mm-hmm.
And they mainly about dance and singing. And then they had a bartender who was kind of part of the show also.
He would sing?
Sing, and they had jokes, and and the girls did a can thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys used to stand on top of a piece of solid wood on top of some horses. What do you call it? Sawhorses?
Sawhorses, yeah.
Yeah, and they'd do these jumps and land on that piece of wood. It was really, really a great show. And a buddy of mine, actually a roommate of mine was in the show. And he met his wife while he was in that show. And then they closed that show, and then they opened the show that I was in. It was called the Diamond Horseshoe Saloon Review and Medicine Show. So we started out having...
You'd been on the street before, and they moved you
to the street
inside.
And they moved me inside. And I had a lot to learn because I was used to doing street stuff, and this was a stage.
So how was that different? I mean, you're doing magic. It's just... You bring it inside.
Yeah, but it was some of the street stuff I was doing. Just
like what were you doing in the street?
I did the pee and shell game in the street. I did. I was doing an ambitious card routine. I was doing a translocation. But none of these things,
would transition
onto
to the stage. I got you. Okay.
So I ended up
had to do more parlor stuff.
Yeah, so I had to figure that out. But there was one thing where I did get away with doing a little. Kind of close-up work because they didn't want me to be on stage all the time. They wanted me to come out into the house and do something in the center of the house.
Oh.
So I did a routine out in the center of the house. And I was only the 2-day guy because there was another guy from out in California, Chris Blackmore. And Chris was the full-time, the 5-day guy, and I did the 2 days.
Okay.
And then Chris decided to go back to California, and they hired me to do the 5 days.
Okay. Now, on the days that he was working and that you worked, was it like an 8-hour shift, or was it so many shows a day? Like
we did so many shows a day. We probably did 5 shows a day.
What, 20-minute shows?
No, it was a good. I felt like everybody did 15. No, that's not right. Yeah, it was pretty close to it. Because the dancing girls came out, and then there was a guitar player.
Yeah.
And he did 15, and dancing girls did 15, and the magician did 15.
Okay.
So it was about a 45-minute show. And what they ended up doing with our show is they left the doors open.
Okay.
So that people could just come and go as they pleased. Sound-wise, it was kind of difficult. What they did with the old show that Bev was in is that you made a reservation.
Right.
You came in, you sat down, you got a meal, and after you ate your meal, you saw the show. With ours, it was just a continuously running place.
Okay, like a real saloon. I mean, people kind of come in, go, and stay, or however long you want to stay. Yeah.
But it's still a lot of fun. I learned a lot there. And I worked with some very talented people, incredible female dancers. The guitar player was an amazing individual, and we would sit backstage and kind of try and figure out bits and ways we could do stuff. And then, sadly, 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And after that, we were all called into a meeting, and I was out of town. And I said, "Where's the piano player?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Which room is the piano player in?" And the piano player was in the room with the magician and the MC and the guitar player.
Okay.
But he wasn't in the room with the girls. So they let go all the can dancers.
Oh.
And they called us in early the next morning, and we had to work on a way to make the show still the same length, but without
the dancers,
the dancing girls. So what would happen is the guitar player would come out, he'd do his bit, and then the MC would come out first, and he'd sing a song, and then the guitar player would come out, he'd do a piece, and then the two of them would sing a song together.
Yeah.
They would introduce me, and at the end of the show, we all sang a song together.
Why were the girls released and no one else? I mean, what
after
9/11 had to do with
9/11,
that?
a lot of people weren't traveling.
Okay.
We
So they were just looking at ways of cutting expenses.
They were cutting expenses.
Oh, and they were the largest group they could let go.
Yeah.
As being part of the act as opposed
It
to
was
one.
sad.
Well, of course it was.
We lost, half of our cast, and it was
Wow.
it was hard to believe.
Mm-hmm.
But we all just kind of buckled down and did it. And
How was that as far as the tourism at that time? I mean, I can remember things being not necessarily, well, some were shut down, but transportation and everything for a while.
Right.
But as far as people feeling comfortable, not only traveling, but going to theme parks and being in large crowds, I mean, obviously it must have affected Disney in a huge way, just as the pandemic did.
Right.
Actually, the pandemic probably was worse from the standpoint of tourism and lasted longer.
Right.
Because after a while, I'm sure people started picking back up and say, okay, I'm okay to travel. But how long were you guys down and devastated from that 9/11 situation?
we weren't down that long. I want to say it was only a couple of days.
Oh, really?
Because,
a couple of days?
Well, there were still people who were trapped there who couldn't get home.
Yeah, well, I remember that. Yeah.
So they wanted us to come in to entertain
There was no
these
fly
people.
across the country back
Right.
then. Yeah.
So it was the first day we were back. It might have even been one day where we had off, but we came back the next day, and we did shows, but it was difficult. You could see it in people's eyes.
You're trying to bring cheer and laughter,
Right?
in a world that needed it but couldn't.
But was possibly maybe too soon.
Yeah. Right.
But they were there on vacation and couldn't go home.
I see your point. It's like they probably come back the second or third time. It's kind of like, well, we've already seen the show. We've seen everything. Wow. Difficult time.
And that was the one of the days that it closed. The park closed that day at about 10:30.
on the day on 9/11.
Yeah.
Well,
About 10:30 or 11.
most companies did.
So they got all the guests out, and then they allowed us to go home. Mm-hmm. So we're walking through the park, and normally there's BGM, background music.
Okay.
And there was no background music except the Haunted Mansion. So you just heard the Haunted Mansion as you were walking out to your car, and it was
That's kind of creepy.
It was a creepy day. It was a
Wow.
weird day, and the next day it rained. When we were back, and there was a moment of silence, and we were just standing out on the front porch in this rain.
Along with that story, I was going to ask you about a few other things. Obviously, the thousands of performances that you've had of having experienced everything and every kind of weather and whatever, being out in the street. Has there been something that has been a story that you like to keep in the back, not in the back of your mind, but it might be one of your favorite stories or a horror story or something you've shared with others? Or something that comes to mind?
There's a story that happened to me. I was working at the studios one day, and I was doing a ambitious card routine.
Okay.
And then I would produce out of a wallet. And then I would usually give it to the kid who signed the card. But this kid's family took off. And this was during the summer, so I was also doing some extra nights at what they called Disney Village. It was a shopping area. And they would hire extra variety performers to perform in this shopping area. So a couple of nights later, I was performing there, and I saw that kid
You remember him?
again
Wow.
in the crowd. And I looked through my deck, and the card was still there.
Oh, okay.
So I forced it on him.
Yeah.
And his folks were just flabbergasted. Absolutely flabbergasted. And this time I gave it to him.
Yeah.
Fast forward 15 years later,
Okay.
this lady comes up to me and she goes, "Did you used to play a character here called the Great HP?" And I was like, well, I knew him very well, because at this point in time I was doing my Jack Diamond character. I was like, I knew him well. He was a great guy. And she goes, and she tells me the story about the time that their son signed a card, and you did some magic with it, and then you saw him another night, and I goes, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. And and then suddenly this man, a grown man in his early 20s, steps over, opens his wallet, pulls out that card.
You've got to be kidding me.
No.
Wow.
So it was just like one of those things where you were like, wow, you kind of forget how much effect you can have on someone, that this guy's carried that in his wallet all this time.
Right.
It was pretty cool.
Wow. That's a hard story to top. That is pretty good.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite little stories. That happened.
They serve alcohol there also, so I'm assuming occasionally you've had some drunk people.
On occasion, you'd get a few. Not very often.
I mean, not in Disney World. I wouldn't think of it. It's where you go there to drink.
Yeah,
that's
right.
That's not your main. There are other bars to go to outside of there.
We had a couple people that were very happy, let's say.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I never ran into anybody who was, completely out of control.
And belligerent to you or anything.
No.
Did you ever interact and work with some of the characters, like Mickey and Minnie and whomever, and have them do magic with you?
One year when I had to do this Sorcerer Mickey show.
Okay.
On the back of one of the streets behind the Great Movie Ride. And so I would get up on stage and do a few magic pieces, and then I would make Sorcerer Mickey appear on top of this building, doing some magical gestures. Okay. So I'd work with him there, and that was kind of a neat experience to be able to work with Sorcerer Mickey like that.
Did you rehearse and stuff like with them?
Yeah, we would rehearse at nighttime usually.
And they're in full costume?
In full costume.
With the rehearsals, okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, I didn't know if the guy was out of the costume and he would kind of walk through the thing with you or something sometimes.
They usually did it to make sure that they knew where everything was going to move. And
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was usually full costume.
I mentioned at the first of this episode about character development and everything, and I know you had gone through different characters. Was the Great HP, which I guess is supposed to be like Harry Potter or something, or what?
Actually, HP was the Great Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus,
yes,
okay.
But Hocus Pocus was his father, and he didn't want to be known as Hocus Pocus. So we went into great lengths of background stories with our characters. So I wanted to just be called the Great HP.
And you create those yourself, or do you have script writers who come in for
we
you?
We would create the characters ourselves.
Yeah.
We would go into a rehearsal process. It used to be a pretty lengthy process.
Like a writer's room kind of a thing?
We would all sit around and we would get down. We would write. We would learn the language of the time, and we would incorporate that within our scenarios that we did, and the pieces that we worked on the streets.
And the costumes, because they've got extensive costume department there, obviously.
Correct.
They would work with you?
Yes, they would
design all your clothing, head to foot.
Sometimes you would tell the designer about your character, and he would go away and he would come back and he would show you the design he had. But on some occasions, they would design without you knowing they were going to change it. So they would come to you and go, "We want to put you in a new costume because you're the one you're in is about to fall apart. And so this is the design we have." And it kind of changed your character a little bit because you didn't feel like the person you were before.
Okay.
Because whether it's a hat or a derby or whatever you're in. So when I came back after I finished the Diamond Horseshoe, I came back as the character of the Great HP. But then we had a new director come in, and he wanted to change the whole environment. He wanted everybody to be what he called fliffy.
Fliffy. F-L-I?
Fliffy.
F-F-Y. Fliffy,
Yeah.
okay.
He felt that characters should be fun, interesting, funny, fantastic, and that was his little anagram for it, fliffy.
Okay.
And so, and that's one of the gentlemen who also said you should find a internal song that your character.
Tell me about that.
Goes. It was like internal song. I've never thought about that before. He said, "Yeah, find a song that when you come out on the street, if you're having a bad day, this song just puts you right into character." And so I chose Sammy Davis Jr.'s "If They Could See Me Now." That little gang of mine. So that was my internal song.
How's that go?
Huh?
How's that go?
If they could see me now, that little gang of mine, I'm eating fancy food and drinking fancy wine.
Okay.
Yeah, that one. So that was my internal song. Mm-hmm. And on some days when it was, so I got to go out there and entertain people.
Sure. I know what
kind
you
of
mean.
dragging,
Yeah.
You'd think of that song and you'd walk out on that street and you were there.
You got to be in the zone there. It's such great advice. I worked at a restaurant for 20 years, and when I would go in, like on a Thursday night for a couple hours, every week, I'd kind of say, okay, as I got out of the car and was walking to the front door, I just kept saying, I love you, and I'd smile, and I was smiling internally, and I would remember there was a billboard, and usually there was some smiling face of somebody, whatever they were selling, whether it was a car or attorneys or grocery store or something. And I'd look up and they kind of make me smile, and I would think about happy things. And so by the time the door opened, I would have a smile pasted on my face, whether I felt like it or not.
Right.
Start with a good mood.
That's great.
And I didn't have an internal song. That's a great idea, though.
Yeah, I thought it was an amazing idea, and it really helped out because, as you know, when you're doing 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, for that amount of time, there are some days when you
really don't want to do it. You don't feel happy.
Well, you're doing it, but you're kind of walking through it.
Yeah,
you're
kind of
thinking, I got to get gas on the way home, stuff like that. So that's why
you're making your shopping list.
That's why I also started doing effects in my show that had more play to them.
Huh.
So they were more playful. They didn't go one direction.
Well, like the shell game, because that can go so many different directions.
It can go so many different directions, and it was always fun. It made you have to think.
Plug and play.
Yeah, and you couldn't zone out during that. You had to stay with it. Because there would be a couple times where you were doing a card effect, and you're like, "Oh crap, where am I?"
That's right. You can't do that.
so that's why. And then my card to pocket routine was kind of very playful. The Chicago kicker thing that I do was a very playful effect and can go different ways. So that helped me out a lot too.
We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, the Winter Carnival of Magic.
It's Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day.
That was Tom Vorjahan. He's the co-chairman for the Winter Carnival of Magic. It's going to be held on March the 9th through the 11th, coming up in Pigeon Forge. That's Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And yeah,
I can't believe you're releasing a podcast on Groundhog Day, though, Scott. This is fun.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the people who attend from year to year, like the dealers that you have. I know you've got a good variety of dealers.
Well, the Winter Carnival prides itself. I got a dealer chairman that used to do it for the IBM, and he's got a laundry list of still brick and mortar shops that do exist. And we bring in different dealers every year. So it's not like Groundhog's Day at all at the Winter Carnival of Magic. We won't let people come in every year, except we made one exception this year, to my knowledge. But we have Don Bursell coming in, who bought H&R Magic books. So he's our book dealer. Los Sanders coming in. Mike Hummer, who's doing a tribute lecture to Al Cohen on Thursday. Well, he's also a dealer, and so he'll be there. Tom Urasitz, who has some great creations that he has. Joe Eddie Fairchild, who builds illusions. He usually talks to several guys while he's there about customizing stuff for him. Patrick Przecki and his mats will be at the Winter Carnival. The mat stack starts out so high you can't see Patrick behind the booth. And by Saturday, I'm sure most of them will be gone. A to Z Magic. Chris Moore, known for his restaurant work and some fantastic original creations. He's going to be there. I'm very excited about that. David Ginn, not only is he donating 200 DVDs to our welcome pack of his Colorful Stage Magic DVD, he's also going to be one of our dealers. Sterlini, coming down from Michigan, as well as Wolfgang coming in from Vegas. That's where we're starting. There's still 2 or 3 still to be added. I can't tell you how excited I am about this year's dealers. It's a great variety. The only one that's coming back is Steve Meyer's Magic, and I bet you haven't heard of them.
I've not heard of them.
They do some of the greatest fake fruit, fake props, like an ice cream thing on a stick, but oranges, strawberries, olives, for final loads for cups and balls, chop cup things, great stuff. So they wanted to come back. I think they really surprised people last year because nobody had expected, you don't go to a convention going, hey, I need a piece of fruit. So I think people
you need it till you see it.
Yeah. So the dealers are fantastic. wintercarnivalofmagic.com. You can go back and look at the list of talent and everything else, figure out how to register. We'd love to see some of your listeners there, Scott.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you there also. And one last thing, if you want a little bit more information on the Winter Carnival Magic, I suggest you go to the convention guide on the website at themagicwordpodcast.com, and you can hear a little bit longer conversation with Tom about some of the details about what's coming up at this year's Winter Carnival Magic, March 9th through 11th. So go check it out. That is at wintercarnivalofmagic.com. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much,
Scott.
Tom.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you,
Say
Scott.
that.
Thank you, Scott.
And now back to our conversation with Terry Ward. When they did have different character changes like that, did it ever, particularly with Disney, did it have to do also with perhaps whatever direction that management felt like, okay, we've got a new movie rolling out with Pocahontas or whatever it happens to be, or Frozen or something, and so we want to go in this direction and we're trying to theme the park more to having people subliminally think we need to go back and see the movie again or buy all this kind of stuff?
I think most of the time for our program,
Yeah.
it depended on the director.
Okay.
Like we had a director who came from Renaissance festivals, who knew what it was like to do that interactive improv, and he was the one that did your internal song. He wanted you to be fliffy, but then the director before him was much more musical oriented, and he wanted music pieces out on the street. And so I think it all depended on the particular director that kind of came through, or directors, because at one point in time we had two of them.
And I would imagine also that you had to go to some sort of school or training or something, and probably as political correctness changed and evolved over the years, sometimes months or days, it seems like things have changed here. But as they do, I'm sure that they would say, okay, you can't say this anymore, or you can say this or not. And I say that because I was the Super Bowl magician when they were in Houston last time, and whenever I had auditioned for that, one of the three guys was a Disney World guy who had booked all the acts, apparently, like you're talking about that fella. And because I remember they liked me and they were using me, during one of my shows I made some comment about a newspaper, Turner Sword newspaper, and I made something about here's a heading that says headless body found on topless beach. Which, funny line. It was a Martin Lewis line. I thought it was great. And afterwards, that guy who was in Disney happened to be watching me, and he said, "You need to cut that out." He said, "This is a family." And I was thinking, okay, I hear where you're coming from. This is a football crowd. We're in Texas. You say no. You're the boss. I didn't say all this. My internal dialogue was going, okay, I'll cut it. But it's a funny line.
Yeah, we had times like that where you would I had a line at the Diamond Horseshoe. It was the year they changed the castle to look like a big cake, and it was all pink.
Oh,
like this big, huge pink
Cinderella's
monster.
castle.
Yes,
about, yeah.
And it was also the time that at Epcot they brought in the Barbie show. So I would have had a line where I said, "Folks, you're probably wondering what happened out there with that." Castle, why it's all pink now. Well, Cinderella's moving out and Barbie's moving in. And they came to me one day and they said, "I don't think we should use that line anymore."
Because Barbie is Mattel, that's not Disney. Is that the reason?
I think part of that, but also they didn't want to mess with the Cinderella brand, and everything. I was like, "That's fine, that's okay, I understand." So we had times like that where they would come in and there'd be a particular line that I'm not sure that's the right choice.
Yeah.
It happened a couple times to a few people where they'd come in and.
Well, no, that's another thing too that I think is important. Is one of the reasons you lasted not only because of your intelligence and your demeanor, but and your skill, but your likability factor. And there have been some people who didn't last so long because behind the scenes they were hard to work with.
Yeah, it's my observation that over the years those who were harder to work with didn't last as long as those who got along with people backstage, or were easy to work with, easy to take direction. So that was an observation that I noticed over the years.
So the easier you make it for your boss and the people around you, the more likely they are to keep you. And that's not just for entertainment, but business in general.
Business in general. Yeah, exactly.
People should be thinking about being a good human being.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes we would have people come in and they'd be out on the street doing their thing, and they just couldn't get it. It was very strange. And then they wouldn't get a contract the next year, and suddenly they would become funny.
Oh, is that right?
It was like I don't know if they were just too tense that they were. I got this job. I got to be good. Yeah. And then once they know that they don't have the job anymore, they suddenly became funny. I was like, where was this?
Yeah, last year.
Last year,
Yeah.
So it was a very funny observation also to make on occasion.
Going back to character development for just a moment, the characters that you were coming up with and these ideas and things, how many different characters did you go through and how did it evolve?
I had Great HP, who was an English character, and then I had a Great HP who was kind of a wise guy character. And then when I moved to do Jack Diamond, they thought the wise guy character I did was too curmudgeon-y. Mm-hmm. And they wanted Jack.
That was the New Jersey kind of guy?
He was Chicago kind of a guy,
okay.
yeah. And they thought he was too curmudgeon-y, so they wanted him to be a little bit more lighter. And that's why I picked that particular
And you changed your
song.
tone and your...
Tone, demeanor.
Uh-huh.
It could still be a touch edgy, but, a few edgy lines could come out, but, it was always like... at the Genie conventions, Richard Kaufman would always say, "You still hit people with lines now, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I do."
But things evolve and change a little bit.
Yeah, you have to soften things up, and then that can really get into your head when you're an improv person, and you're having to second guess things that are coming out of your mouth or you're about to say. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously you've been trained underneath the Disney traditions to be the certain person that people expect to see when they come to Walt Disney World. But, we every now and then we like to touch that line a little bit, but some people would take a step over it. Mm-hmm. It has to be reeled back in. And sometimes you could do it just by accident. Something could come. There was a time I was at the Diamond Horseshoe, and there was this lovely lady sitting next to a guy, and I said, "Is that your husband?" And she says, "No." And I was like, but she holds up her hand and shows a ring.
Shows a ring, okay.
I said, "Oh, so y'all are engaged?" And she said, "No." I said, "So you gave her a ring, but you didn't have the balls enough to ask her to marry you?" And then I came off stage, and all my buddies went, "You just said balls on stage."
And you didn't even realize
And I was like, "I didn't." I'm going upstairs. So I go up to the stage manager and I go, "I just said balls on stage. It just came out like it was a natural. It's in my vernacular.
Yeah.
I apologize."
Not going to happen again?
Yeah, not going to happen again. But it just came out.
Well, how'd the audience react?
They laughed.
Okay.
They laughed, but I didn't, and I didn't realize I even said it because it just came out of my mouth. And
seemed natural.
Yeah, it did. It was just like in my natural kind of vernacular.
In working with Disney also, did they move people around such that, did you ever go do cruises saying, "We want you to go out on a cruise"?
The cruise thing's very different because I think from what I understand, you have to be away from the company for a period of time before you can go work on the cruise line.
Really?
Yeah, because they're different entities.
So
like one time they wanted me to come on the cruise line and perform magic for the Disney Vacation Organization.
Okay.
But I couldn't do it because I was underneath an equity contract at Disney, and the cruises don't have that. So they had a problem with it.
So you would have had to have terminated your employment.
Terminated my employment, waited a couple months, and then could have gone on the ships.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's how they're doing it now, but at the time, that's the way it was.
Now, when did you leave them? How long has it been since you've been with Disney?
I left during they let us all go. All the actors on property were let go during COVID.
In 2020? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was about 250 full-time and about 700 altogether some were just part-time and did a couple shows, here and there.
So there were 700 that were let go?
700 people were wiped off.
And how many of those have come back?
I would say probably a good 200 to 300. I think there's
they're still not back up to full staff.
No, they're not. They're not back up to what they used to be. There's still no variety performers at the studios or at the Magic Kingdom on Main Street like there used to be.
And no street performers like there were. What you call a street experience? What was that? Streetopolis?
Streetmosphere?
Streetmosphere, nothing like that?
No, because they changed Streetmosphere to what we used to call Citizens of Hollywood. That's what our group was. Now, and we were 30 when I started there.
Is that when you wore the spats? Didn't you wear spats or something?
I wore spats when I worked at King's Dominion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You may remember that picture from one of the magazines. Yeah. Yes, it was a cool all purple costume. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But And I did actually wear spats for a couple special events. Yeah. The people that were working on Hollywood Boulevard, we were called the Citizens of Hollywood. Now, when I started, we were 30. When we were let go, we were 8.
Wow.
So the program had been...
Was it because of seniority that you guys stick around, or how were they selecting the survivors?
you hope it's because of the work.
Yeah.
You were doing good work.
Yeah.
You know, because there was a period of time when you used to have to re-audition every year. But when Actors Equity came in, as long as you were doing a good job, you didn't have to audition. You could go into your yearly contract negotiation, negotiate your pay, and then sign your equity contract.
And you negotiate that yourself, or do you have like someone from the union that comes in with you? Or
nope,
okay.
I negotiated that myself.
Okay, you ever had an agent?
I have several agents that not like in Orlando that I used that book me, but they're not like my personal agent.
Currently, you mean?
Right.
Okay.
I have multiple agents I work through.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of the work that you do now, I assume, is just some corporate type of things of
Well,
shows
I'm working several days a week at a place in Kissimmee. It's called the Great Magic Hall. It is located in Old Town off of 192. And we do shows there every day of the week. And you start out in a parlor environment, and then you move to another room to see close-up, and then you move to another room to see stage. And then you come into another room. We do a little pitch
about
we pitch magic tricks that we sell. Magic tricks that we sell.
Oh, okay.
And then it's about a 30 to 35-minute show. It's $10 a person, and it's a lot of fun. Owned by a very intelligent individual, Attilio. He's the owner of the place. He owned Theater Magic, which used to be the magic shops at Universal Studios for many, many years.
How many magicians work there?
We have Jaffo, who was on Penn and Teller Fool Us. Nathan Comarsh, who's been on Penn and Teller. A gentleman by the name, he calls himself Cardini, but his name is Dennis, and he works there. We have Dan Stapleton. A guy who used to be a cruise ship magician for many years who comes in on occasion, performs. Danny Hernandez, a young magician from down in Miami who will occasion join us.
I think I've met him too.
And perform. Nice.
Does Eric Olson work there?
No. Eric's been really busy with trade shows.
Trade shows, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, real busy with trade shows.
Because his place closed also, wasn't that in Kissimmee?
He had a place called Wizards.
Yeah.
And it was open every Monday night.
In Kissimmee.
In Kissimmee, yeah.
And Kissimmee is near Orlando.
It is.
It's a suburb, basically.
It's a big kind of a tourist area, Kissimmee is.
And it's also where a lot of baseball teams have their spring training.
Yeah, a lot of them used to be there for spring training, but not too many of them are left. They've moved.
They go out to Arizona?
Moved to other places.
Huh. Yeah, because I was thinking Kissimmee was a big place for that.
We still get a few that, I think we get a couple that still play at the ESPN park. At Disney.
That's just fascinating. Do you work a little bit of trade shows? I mean, for Disney?
I've done trade shows, not for Disney, but for other magicians who hired me over the years to go out and do trade. I've done them in Vegas and Chicago, there in Orlando. Orlando is an interesting market trade show-wise because people come there, but, I mean, there's so much to do that they don't come to a trade show for long.
So they don't stay in the hall. They'll go out.
They'll go
a lot of
out
times
to
they'll bring
parks.
their families with them also, I guess.
Parks but you go to other places and you're like, man, I haven't stopped working. It's been a long day.
Yeah. I would imagine that would be different, and because I have been at some trade shows on both sides in Orlando, exactly like you said. Like if I'm down there on business,
right,
I'm going out and playing golf,
right,
rather than hanging around the booth, working the booth. But if I'm performing, I'm looking for people to come in because they're out playing golf,
entertain. Yeah. So it's but I've worked some trade shows in Houston, all across the country, and I enjoy the work, and it's very. I've learned a lot. I wasn't good at it at first. It took me a little while to figure it out.
So, of all those things that you have been doing or have done, when you look back on your life, and you have a lot more left to live. You're still a young man.
Right.
What have you enjoyed really the most doing? With the trade shows and theme parks and
I just enjoy the freedom of working as a character doing magic. Because,
you like the character?
Yeah, I think you have a little bit more freedom of what comes out of your mouth because they know it's not a real person. It's a character.
Right.
And so I enjoy that freedom of that. And I had to learn early on that when I do a trade show, I have to kind of think.
Step out of that?
No, I have to kind of think of a character for the show.
See. So step into a character.
Yeah, step into a character because it allows me to be more. Because at first I was too uptight at trade shows, just because I knew I had somebody who had hired me to come in their booth, and I'm trying to pitch their product at the same time performing magic, and I took it all too seriously, and I had to realize that I had to come up with a trade show character that was, kind of a pitch guy, and once I found that was a little bit better, a little easier to take.
So do you have that character as a pitch man as opposed to just being Mr. Nice Guy? I mean, I don't have a trade show character. I feel like I'm a business executive who does magic.
It helped me out.
Okay.
So now I'm a little bit more comfortable in my own self now. Yeah. I don't think early on I was as comfortable because as you don't do this for a longer time, you become more comfortable as yourself performing magic.
Well, that's true. I think in anything, whether you work in a restaurant or anything,
right?
And
I think there was a time when I was like, I think I'm comfortable doing this now. I enjoy it, and I think just took a little bit of realization to understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up over here, then I want to ask you, Terry, about your Magic Word. The name of my podcast is called the Magic Word Podcast, so I always like to close by asking my guests what it is that is their philosophy of life, or what is it that you live by, what's important. You've talked about several things that you have done in your life or your career and directions and things that are important to you, and what do you live by?
Relationships.
Oh, good. Doesn't have to be a word. It could be a phrase or whatever. I mean, whatever.
Relationships with the people you work with, the people you meet, the people you entertain. I think it's all about the relationships.
So maintain good relations with everybody. Just be nice, I guess. Have good relationships with everybody because because it's self-serving, but it's just that's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do, and you never know.
Or leave.
If you're like, for example, you're talking to a person who takes your dirty laundry at the end of the day. You never know if 5-6 years down the road they could be your stage manager. You don't know that. So you got to treat them the same way you want to be treated. That's
good. And also, a takeaway for me is to find your own internal music.
Yes.
I love that.
It's a great thing.
So many times, because it doesn't matter what your walk of life is, wherever you're going to be going into, whatever situation, not just work situation, but whatever, that you have some trepidation or some worry or anxiety about that. Just
find your internal song and step into it.
Terry, it's been great.
Pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it great. One I meant to ask earlier, I guess the last thing would be about where people can find your DVDs and all the information if they wanted to learn more about you or learn from your lecture.
Well, I have a lecture on Penguin.
Okay.
Penguin Live lecture. Okay. And that's
just type in Terry Ward and find it through Penguin.
Find my live lecture there. I don't think they carry my DVDs anymore. I have a very small box of them. But if you get in touch with me through Facebook or something, I'll be glad to slide one your way.
Okay, sounds great. Terry, thanks very much. Appreciate you being my guest.
Thank you, Scott.
So with the Magic Word Podcast, that was Terry Ward. This is Scotty out. Thank you, Terry, very much for being my guest this week. That was just a whole heck of a lot of fun and very insightful to get a lot of those details about your background. And golly, something to aspire to for all of us magicians, to try to get those 10,000 hours to become the expert that you are. Congratulations. And I also want to thank you, Terry, very much for the package of the offer you've given to the listeners to be in this week's contest. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. Towards the end of this episode, Terry was talking about having a DVD that is available, and also he has a Penguin lecture. Well, he is now offering one of those DVDs and one of those Penguin lectures for free to a winner of the contest. I should say to two winners. So one thing for one and one for the other. You get the idea. Anyhow, if you go to themagicwordpodcast.com, there you will find a registration or an application form where you can fill out. All you have to do is put your name and your email address, and you will automatically be registered for this week's contest. We'll let that run for a couple of weeks as we normally do, and in order to give more people an opportunity to try to get caught up, because we seem to be flooding you with so many different podcasts from week to week, particularly when we go to these magic conventions and have all these daily reports. But anyhow, it's hard to keep up, I understand. But I want to give you as much opportunity as we can in order to have the most people to have an opportunity to win. This contest is open to anyone in the world, but the foreign shipping will have to be reimbursed for those if someone's name happens to be selected who resides outside of the United States. Other than that, then postage will be paid by Terry Ward. I also want to remind you to go and check out the information for the Winter Carnival of Magic and patronize our sponsor by registering for this year's convention. It should be a lot of fun. As I mentioned, I'll be there, and we're going to have something special we're going to be doing with the podcast, perhaps doing something live. So you'll have an opportunity to join us in the audience as we actually do a recording while we're there as well. And there's a lot of other things that are going to be going on as well. One last thing I'd like to leave you with, and that is if you are interested in learning more about the 10,000 hour principle that was written in the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. If you'll go to themagicwordpodcast.com, there you'll see a link on this week's blog that you can click on that will take you to Amazon. Of course, you can go to Amazon and find that directly. However, if you go through our website and click on the Amazon link that is on every page of our blog, then when you are directed to your account, then the Magic Word Podcast will receive a little bit of something from Amazon for every purchase that you make, not only for that book, but any other purchases and all purchases that you make. So think about that whenever you're going to be wanting to purchase something on Amazon. Don't forget the magicwordpodcast.com. Again, go to the website. At the bottom of every page, you will see a little graphic, and just click on that. That will take you to there, and you can order whatever you want. So that kind of helps us if you want to give us a little bit of love. We appreciate any and everything that you can do to help this podcast. I'll be heading to South Lake Tahoe this next week, so I'll be away. However, I will already have next week's episode ready to be posted, and so you will enjoy this one coming up with a friend of mine from Las Vegas. I'm sure you will enjoy, and I will give you a little bit of a tease right now. He happens to be a fabricator, that is a builder, magic builder, and someone who is not as well known as some of the others that you might know. Anyhow, you're going to make a new friend next week. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being my listener. And so, until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember these three things. Maintain good relationships, be nice, and find your own internal song and step into it. This is Scotty out.